In the very first slide, I have mentioned some introduction details around the style components, which we already discussed. This is the command that we need to execute to install styled components library inside a React project. Once the installation is completed, you can try to create a component with the help of styled object that is imported from the styled-components. Here, I'm trying to create a button. The beauty of the styled components is within the JavaScript, we can write the CSS code. So here I also highlighted CSS in JS. Once the component is created, we can use it inside other component as a child, as you can see here. This is all you know. Let's go to the next slide. In this slide, I have an example explaining on how to conditionally style our component using properties. Like we discussed in the previous lecture, please make sure you are using arrow function instead of plain JavaScript expression. I have mentioned this example inside this slide for your future revisions. In the next slide, I have an example on how to apply styling with the help of pseudo selectors. You need to make sure you are mentioning ampersand colon followed by your pseudo selector like hover and focus. The next slide is going to have some new information. This is an example which we have not discussed, but I'll try to explain here itself. If you see here, I have a card styled component which I'm trying to use here. This card style component is using div HTML element behind the scenes. Under this div, I have h2 and paragraph HTML elements. With the help of styled components, you can also define nested rules as well. Whatever styling I have defined in the black color, they are specific to the div element. But what about the children elements like h2 and p? If you are looking for an option to style the children elements as well, style component allow it. You just have to mention ampersand followed by space. This space indicates whatever value that comes after the space, it is a child. If you're not mentioning any space, then it refers to the current element itself. If you see here, we don't have any space between ampersand and colon hover because we want to apply the styling to the same element, which is button. That's why here space is not required. Whereas in this scenario, we want the style to be applied to the child element, which is h2. That's why we need to make sure we are mentioning space between ampersand and h2. This ampersand refers to the element that we have here. Under this div, I'm going to have an h2 element. For that h2 element, I want this CSS style to be applied. The same applies for the paragraph element as well. We just have to mention ampersand, space and p. And for the paragraph, I want to apply the styling which is color as gray. This is how you can apply nested rules inside style components. Style components is a very powerful concept. I hope you are liking this. Inside the next slide, I have an example explaining on how to use media queries inside the style components. What are media queries? With the help of media queries, we can write some responsive CSS styling. To write media query CSS, you can directly write at media just like how you write inside normal CSS file as well. Followed by you can mention your media condition. Here I am telling max width 100 px. So whenever your screen size met this media condition, these styling they are going to be applied. So there is no difference on how you are going to write media queries inside a styled component and inside a normal CSS file. It is going to work very similar way. In the last slide, I have pros and cons around the styled components. Advantages are these styled components, they are going to have the CSS styling scoped to the given component that we have developed. There is no scope conflicts, there is no global scope, just like how we have inside the CSS modules. Dynamic styling with the props is also possible inside the style components. There won't be any separate CSS file. Few people, they are going to like it because they are maintaining all the JavaScript and HTML and CSS inside a single file. In case if there is a separate CSS expert developer, he or she can quickly understand how to develop styled components and they can keep developing styled components inside separate files. Once those files and components are ready, the actual developer who is building the business logic with the help of functional components can import the style components and start injecting inside the functional components. Coming to the disadvantages, whoever is developing these styled components, they should have a good understanding on the CSS basics because we are going to develop all the CSS logic from scratch. The next disadvantage is around the performance impact. If your application is a large application and if you have thousands of styled components, there will be a slight performance issue because at the end of the day, whatever logic that you're going to write inside your styled component, it needs to be compiled into some other format by the styled component library. So that compilation or rendering process is going to take few nanoseconds or milliseconds based upon how large your application is. For majority of the application, this should not be a problem. And the last disadvantage is large projects, they end up accumulating a large number of small wrapper components inside their projects. Since developers are going to develop good amount of styled components inside the business logic, every developer, they have to use these wrapper components before they write their actual business logic. This can be some inconvenience under certain scenarios, especially if the project has thousands of styled components. I hope you got some good clarity around the styled components. With this, we have discussed all the three famous approaches that developers use inside the industry to style their React components. One common point in these three options is the CSS styling has to be developed from scratch by using all the CSS supported syntaxes and elements and properties. But what if a project, if they don't want to start their styling of the React component from scratch? They don't want to write the CSS styling from scratch. Instead, they want to use some readily available libraries or frameworks. Let's try to explore this angle as well from the next lecture.